68% of men and women who ever even touch a gun will be injured or murdered by a gun.
We are standing on holy ground. These are 288 of God's children who should be wearing T-shirts today. This is the 5th stop of the Memorial to the Lost, and it will keep traveling around the city. Pray for each one of these T-shirts, for the families represented, that this might bring some healing and courage to speak up and say yes to God, no to gun violence.
I know that we have called you here today for the International Prayer for Peace. To think that 288 people wore those shirts and they're no longer here. And then we hope you'll join in this movement. This is a movement that we have.
Holy God, hear our prayer. Hear us as we pray for healing of the violence in our society. Accept our prayers for those who are hurt, Lord, the children, the women and the men who are victims of violence. God, help us to change things. Fill us with your spirit of life and truth, so that we shall no longer permit the senseless violence to exist. Forgive us when we allow our intolerance or apathy to outweigh our willingness to protect the victims of violence.
Are we willing to tolerate this number of deaths in our city? Philly has more deaths from guns in a year than Australia, more than Germany, more than Canada. It's got more, yeah. Philly has more deaths in a month than Japan has in a year. Are we going to do something about this or not? The flood of guns that is available to people that we all agree should not have it, that flood has to stop. There are not many people killed in drive-by baseball bats. I will commit myself, and I do, to reaching out to my community who have neglected their testimony of peace and has become way too caught up in the gun culture of America. That is part of my calling. That is where I have to go to work. I'm sure all of you know people that are part of the gun culture that you need to talk to. Let's reach out. Reach up, reach deep, reach out.
23 years ago, my son and his best friend were murdered leaving a movie theater. 5 men opened fire on the car that they were in, killing my son. The 5 men had Tech 9s. That moment has stayed in my mind and my heart forever. My son was an innocent person. He didn't do anything to anybody. He was home for the weekend from Cheyney University, waiting to go back to school the day after Labor Day. It's a hurting thing to come out here and plead and beg with people to help try to save lives. This is not just our battle. It was my son, their son, maybe your son one time, but God knows whose son will be next. Who will be next? I don't want anybody to be next. We don't want anybody to be next. We want us all to come together and find a way. It's got to be a way, because I hear my son crying from the grave, say, Mom, you got to continue to do something. But it takes all of us to come and help. God bless you, and please continue to pray for all of the mothers and fathers who have lost children senselessly. Thank you.
But I'm so and thoroughly convinced that God will get your attention no matter how. The age of 16 years old, I asked my child, I said, do you care whether you live or whether you die? And to have my son tell me no. 1 year later, he's now sentenced to 110 years in prison as a perpetrator. April 14th, 2010. My youngest son, Solomon Maurice Montgomery, was murdered, shot over 14 times. So I can speak about the statistics on both sides. And it is not only because of the pain, but it is because of the pain and in the midst of the pain that God is using us to speak for the voices that have been silenced. We can't come to church and be quiet and be comfortable in the pews when our children and our babies are dying.
I thank God for this day, and I thank God for everyone that stands out here as a witness to life and not to murder. On January 15, 2008, I moved from Philadelphia because I did not want my 2 young sons to become statistics on the streets of Philadelphia. Exactly 3 years to the day that I left, January 15, 2011, I was putting my baby, my youngest child of 4, Charles Andre Johnson, 18 years old, in the ground. He was sitting in the car waiting for his older sister when 2 boys walked up to the car and put 4 bullets in my son. It was in a case of mistaken identity because 2 boys were beefing over a girl and they thought my son was the boy coming back to retaliate. My life has not been the same. My son has a voice. My son has a voice through the crack in my heart. My son's blood now runs through our streets with the bloods of so many other children, so many other young adults. And you would think for a family to suffer this tragedy once was enough. On January the 1st of this year, my little cousin who grew up in my home, who I made a plate for every night, Stephen Kyrie Johnson, 24 years old, about to graduate from the Temple Fox School of Business, went to a party when he didn't even want to go. 2 boys got into an altercation and he attempted to be a peacemaker, and a boy put a gun to his chest and killed him. 26 days after my son died, his only child was born. When your life is reduced to all you want is to kiss your baby's neck again, no one should have to suffer this pain. This is why I walk and I stand with Heeding God's Call, because they are working to get the guns off the street. That's all they're worried about. They're worried about saving your kids. And this violence, it crosses color, it crosses money, it crosses politics. The lawmakers are not going to fix this problem. It's going to be the faithful. It's going to be us standing together as one. Muslims, Jews, Christians, Protestants, evangelists, all of us standing together, one voice, one nation. Peace! Peace! For our children.
And this is the first time that I have ever looked up and seen a bunch of people that look like me. This is the first time that I have ever looked up and seen a bunch of people that look like me. These are our children. These are our neighborhoods. These are our schools. So you need to ask yourself how you're going to get involved and what are you going to do when you leave here today.
In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the calling to speak is often a vocation of agony, but we must speak. We are cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors. We are all related to the victims of violence. We are the children of the Most High God. We speak for the voiceless of Washington, D.C., Newtown, Tucson, Columbine, Virginia Tech, Aurora, Oak Creek, Fort Hood, San Diego, and now the U.S. Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., and all the wounded from every city and every town, every hamlet, and every village throughout this beloved nation, for all our communities torn by the ravages of gun violence. In the words of Dr. King, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Now is the time to end the senseless killing of our boys and our girls, our men and our women.
For those of you that have come for just these few moments to remember and reflect on these lives, consider God's call on our lives to do something about it. There's an experience in the Bible where Jesus comes to the mountain to give an update to the Old Testament teachings of the law. And he begins to update the 10 Commandments. And he talks about murder. He says, you've heard it said, do not commit murder. But he says, but I say, don't even hate. We're reminded by these crosses that as we gather together with our hallelujahs, as we gather together with our celebrations of God, it's in the context that lives are being lost. So we cannot anesthetize ourselves to the realities of the streets by hiding out in our sanctuaries. But the reality is we gather to worship, but we scatter to make a difference. I thank Heeding God's Call for allowing us to share and to have this display. You need to know the countless number of calls that have come to this church because people pass this street. People are passing the street and they're asking, what are the t-shirts or what are they about? It's given us the opportunity. Secretaries have been all week long just sharing what this is about. What's going on? What do they mean? And we're able to remind them of what's going on in the streets. For some of them, it's offensive because it's too close. We've gotten calls about why is that there? Why does it need to be up here? Because it is up here. We need to recognize that this is our city. It is right here. But the good thing is we also are right here. And greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. So I want to celebrate and I want to thank you for being here. I want to challenge you to not turn this into another religious gathering. And when we do that, we'll make a difference in this community.